I'm really excited to be here because I get to talk to some of my peers, but also some people who all inspire me every day in my work. Indigenous women hold it down, of course, on our sets. Yeah, hold it up, hold it down on our sets in our community and within storytelling. And thank you, Zena and Kayah, so much for having us here. Toexitnism, it's great to be on Musqueam, Skokomish territories. I really want to kind of ground us in what cultural responsibility maybe looks like first. So when I go on my sets, I try to build in not only policy written down word, but also how we behave, how we act, and how we walk, and how we step in a gentle way. So I'm going to ask you guys a question first, just to open it up. Let's go from checklists and kind of put down ideas of checklists, which are great to have all these new technologies and ways of being, but about how we take that in. How do we actually embody and walk in this way? So let's talk about, I just want to open up first about what does cultural responsibility on set mean to you? And then I'm going to start with the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah. Sure. Watch everyone. Jules, Koostachin, Leena, and Tisina Kasun, Arawapska Nitochin. I'm very, very honored to be here on these sacred lands. I think for me is just being around or surrounded by like-minded people who have the same values and ethics as you do. And I think that's a great starting point in terms of, working in community and making sure that you don't leave a footprint. Miigwech.
Yeah. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Lyana Patrick, member of the Stellarton First Nation Frog Clan, as well as Acadian and Scottish from Unamaki. And also grateful to be striving to be a good relative on Coast Salish lands. So cultural accountability on set. I think for me, the two most important things in all of the work I do are the relationships that I carry and are accountable to and have responsibility for, and the protocols that I'm directed to follow and to understand. And so those are two of the things that kind of spring to mind when you talk about cultural accountability in the work that I do. I'll see.
Hot squail tanoyap, hotlia Queen Krishamin, Kayah George Queen Sna, Tanachinkla the Chlelip, Tanachinkla Slewiteth, Scalus Tan Months, it's all Tatlanchishet, a Alan Hotland Squallowin. As I just said in this Squamish language, that's my grandma, my Ta'az first language. My traditional name's Halia, my name's Kayah George. I come from Tsleil-Waututh Nation and Tulalip tribes. My father's Sclus, my mother's Sitsayaltsa, and Anhatlan Squallowin means I just feel happy, very loosely translated into English. There's no direct translation. I'm like, my heart's like lifted. Yeah. Yeah, so it's, again, great to be here. And as I was thinking about your question, I was sort of reflecting on sort of the practices I've been taught just in day-to-day life from my grandmother and my aunties and uncles and my parents about what it means to be culturally responsible and understanding in everyday life. So I try and bring that forward into set, specifically especially when you're working with so many different people with so many different backgrounds. It's holding a lot of space and a lot of intentionality for everybody to show up fully as they are in whatever way they are, and to, of course, abide by and uphold the sacred laws and traditions that have been on the territory wherever you're filming, wherever you're working since time immemorial. And I know for me, I've been able to work on my own territory, so I've had that privilege to be able to understand my own laws and protocols and bring those forward. But when I'm a guest on others' lands, which it's a beautiful thing, I think it's really fun and really amazing to learn other people's laws and protocols. But one thing that's really consistent, as was said before, is to always leave a place better than when you found it, and to always respect the land and the cultures that have been there for a long time. So, yeah.
Thank you. Lyana, I was going to talk a bit about Nechako. I mean, it's a brand new doc. If you guys haven't seen the feature, it's on nfb.ca right now.
November 17th.
Oh, it's out.
After November 17th,
Oh, after
it will
November
be
17th.
streamed.
Sorry, I'm a little early. I'm a little early. Anyways, hyping pre-promotion. So your work bridges environmental storytelling and community well-being, and especially in Nechako, you took that approach as well. So how do you see sustainability as both sort of in production value as well as your cultural responsibilities as well while you're filming?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please watch Nechako if you get a chance. It's in Victoria tomorrow, if anybody's in Victoria. Yeah, so I think that, you know, my contribution to this conversation is centered around a lot around the topic, like the subject matter of what Nechako is about, which is about restoration and stewardship of our lands and waters in Dakota territory, in my own homelands, and so coming into it, I had a very deep commitment to ensuring that it was a community-led and community-driven process of telling the story in terms of how we told it and what what we talked about within it. So I think that the idea of sustainability, it resonates in a few different ways. I think it's about the how that you're making it. It's about the people that you're bringing in, and it's also the kinds of lessons that you're conveying to a bigger audience about the ways in which we lived on these lands and waters and the impacts that colonial policies, that industrial, the extractive policies have, the impacts that they've had on our lands and waters, and of course on our peoples, on our communities. So I think that it's demonstrating a different pathway forward by the very nature of like the subject matter, and in terms of the how, it's like, I think this is actually connected to another question that we're going to talk about, but I'll just answer it now. Hopefully I have like a different response later. But I think it's challenging also those like industry standards of how things are done and talked about. We had agreements with the community with like what, even like who was going to own the story and, the process by which we were going to involve the community. The very, like the participants in the film were not subjects, they're participants. They're people who are actively involved in creating the story and in the very ways that they're demonstrating a different way of being. So I think that, we really need to, I think, challenge what those industry standards are and think about the process differently. I think this is, from an Indigenous perspective, from Indigenous perspectives, there's not one. This is, I think, the kind of intervention that we can make in terms of what sustainability means. And it's, we spent like 2 years in development, and the process involved, many community meetings and understanding like the heart of what this story is. And in that that process is the most important piece, because once you have, the trust and that kind of responsibility grounded in the project, then then it can kind of move forward in a way that I think reflects, community needs and aspirations. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess it's an interesting thing to think about. It's different because this is also a very small scale, documentary film, but I think the way in which people are doing this work particularly Indigenous filmmakers are doing this work, shows leadership and shows a very different way of being in this industry. So I know that the other filmmakers can talk much more about this than I can. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much. To go on to Jules, you've now filmed in Kwantlen twice. You had the privilege of being asked back again. Coming from Ottawa, coming to BC, where we have First Nations here and a lot of different protocols through nations. You developed that long-term relationship with the community itself. Do you want to talk a bit about your direct accountability there, and sort of what you try to embody with your practices, like waste reduction or community respect, or how to do that in a sort of a small, contained way, but also maintaining a relationship with First Nations itself?
That is a thesis question.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Let me see if I got it.
We'll not do the thesis, but you can give us the.
Okay, so Kwantlen, one of my really, I have a good friend, Joseph Dandaran, who I've known for like 30 years when I was born. Just kidding. I've known him for a long time, and I think the thing that we have to always kind of remember is that we're building relationship and we're sustaining relationship. First and foremost, when you go into a community, you got to make sure that you can show your face again. So the stakes are high for Indigenous folks. Our community's small. We all know each other across Turtle Island, even into the US. Like, we just know each other as filmmakers. And so when you go into a community that's not your own, all eyes are on you. You got one chance, because if you make someone angry, someone's going to tell you to leave. And that is the reality, right? And I think with
Not to
Kwantlen-
scare you, guys.
No,
It's
too
just
scary.
For us. We have we get like 100 times.
Yeah,
the
you get like
scrutiny.
the row of aunties,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you're like, oh no, what did someone do? I think with the smaller scale, like Wapike was an NFB documentary. We had, and I see Cam over there. Hey, Cam. He worked on it. And we had a predominantly Indigenous crew. So we knew how to behave, and we knew what we had to do because we're aware of protocol. And I think there's a standard protocol, right? Respect and reciprocity in any Indigenous community. And we had an amazing ally, our producer, Terry Snellgrove. And we had a lot of time to prep and have conversation about how we were going to approach the community, how we were going to, and we had a very small crew, so it was easy to manage. And then we shot Angela's Shadow, which is a feature film, bigger budget, and bigger crew. And I think it's a little bit more difficult to manage that in terms of people's choices and their behaviors. But my first AD, Angie Nolan, who's non-native and ally, we would start the day with prayer. We'd start the day with smudge. We would remind people, we are on someone else's land. Behave. Be good, be better person. You know what I mean? Like, we are here, we are guests. And I think if you start the day that way with medicine, with smudge, it kind of aligns everyone, and then we go in, making sure that we're invited back. And I think you always have to have that in the back of your mind. Can I show my face here again? And I think with the larger crew, like I said, I think, we had initially, I was talking to Patty, our producer, about a sustainability strategy, and we did have one for the telefilm application. And can I find it? No, because I have a sea of emails and everything, but I tried. But I think setting the tone every day in the morning with everybody, and then for Angela's Shadow, we also had a predominantly Indigenous crew. We had a lot of non-Indigenous folks, but we made sure that we had communication with everyone before they were hired as well, to make sure you have like-minded people around you. What else? I'm just thinking, I remember, I'll just share a little story off topic, but when I was shooting my TV series called ASCII Boys, we went into 13 different Native communities. So we went into one particular community. We got there late, small crew, and the chief was like, before you film, you have to come and sit down in my office. So we're already late. The sun's going down. We're like, oh my God, we have to start shooting. But he's like, you have to know the history of this place before you turn your cameras on. And I could see the producers, they're like this. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to interrupt them. Like, you interrupt them, because my teaching is never, ever interrupt a knowledge keeper or an elder. That is something you do not do. And documentary is tricky, right? Because sometimes they like to talk and the camera battery is dead or whatever. But in this particular situation, we sat there for an hour and a half. And the sun was going down. And then he's like, okay, now you know what this place is all about, you know the history of this place or their story of this place, now you can shoot. And boy, we ran out, we got our day, but it was just like, that was protocol. And if we didn't sit there and listen to him, he would have asked us to leave. And then we wouldn't have an episode, right? So anyway, that's just something to share. But
It's great lessons, and you learn them as you go, and you try to be as agile as possible, obviously. For Bones of Crows, we also did like 10 different First Nations territories, and each of them have a different practice of not only religion, but ways of being and ways of operating with the land. So thank you for sharing something so tangible for us. Also, like the next time you go in, you can be like, hey, I'm going to do that hour and a half the day before or 2 days prior. And then, so, you know, each place has a special thing, and you can kind of suss out where you can develop that relationship. And maybe if you can preload it beforehand and be able to go through the protocols and make sure you can show up and get your day. Yeah, and money for prep. So I'm gonna thank you so much for. We're gonna talk to Kayah. You've also talked about sort of being raised, and your short doc is in your community on the territory, so all the aunties can see you all at once. So you have direct accountability to your relations. So if somebody's gonna call you in, especially if you don't clean up your backyard, so how do you sort of look at community-based accountability, and how does it reshape your film crew and your behavior on your land? And maybe for your next, did you learn anything that for your next short?
Yeah, so a bit of background. Also, I want to mention we all have these like big boots on. I love it. We all got the same memo. My dear friend,
Ass kicking boots.
Yeah.
Like aunties.
My co-director got these for my birthday one year, and she was like, "These are for stomping on the patriarchy, just so that you
Nice.
know." Like, this is, and I was like, "Okay, thank you, Jamie. Shout out Jamie, I love her." So that's what we're all doing, I guess. Yeah. So accountability on my own land. I definitely did feel the extra pressure, of course, to like do the story justice, because a bit of background. About a little over 2 years ago, my short film, Our Grandmother the Inlet, premiered at Vancouver International Film Festival, and it's based on my own story of like healing from trauma and just finding my reconnection to like myself and my water and my culture. And there's themes of just reconnecting to the land as well, but it directly references our creation story, like the creation story of the Tsleil-Waututh people. We come from the inlet, and Tsleil-Waututh directly translates to people of the inlet, so that's hence the title. We see the inlet as our grandmother, and it's the most holy, the most sacred place in the world to us. So yeah, I felt the pressure. I was like, I gotta do this justice in so many different ways. And for us, we always said the process is just as important as the product. So we want to embody every single step of the way in the making of this, what it means, like the whole meaning of the project. So even especially in pre-production, we would really take it easy on ourselves. And like my dad and my grandma are in the film as well, and so even speaking with them and going to their home, I didn't skimp out on on protocol just because I know them like super well. I still like brought them food, and of course like compensation, and like just like went at their own pace. And like Jules said, like, you don't interrupt them, even if we're way off topic, we're talking about something totally different, that's okay, there's value in that. And we found in a moment that my grandma, my ta'a, as we say in my language, there was a moment where we weren't even like it was in between recording, she was just kind of talking. She was like, as a Tsleil-Waututh woman, she's like, I really like speaking. I was like, yeah, that's really great. I was really prepping for the next question. She was like, I've always been told to step back and be quiet. But she was like, it's in every single fiber of my being. As a Tsleil-Waututh woman from a matriarchal community, you're going to hear my voice. And I was like, we looked at each other, and I was like, it was recording. And Jimmy was like, yeah. And now it's a scene in the film. So there's so many different layers of teachings and protocols that I had to abide by. And getting a little off topic, but
No, that's great. We all have dad protocols, and ta'a protocols are just as important.
Yeah, exactly. And so the protocols of the land, I feel like in every step of the process, we wanted to continue and have those teachings there. So we started every single day with a prayer, and we had for every major role that wasn't held by an Indigenous person on set. We had a mentee, an Indigenous youth mentee, who was training like under them and learning from them. So it was a majority, like the whole production was majority Indigenous, and more specifically Coast Salish, and as many Tsleil-Waututh people as possible as well. But I think I feel like I got really lucky in that, and especially because I had my grandma on set. So if anybody like had an issue, like she would be like, "No, it's fine," and like I felt very protected. But also she would call me in. There was moments where she was like, "Okay, you really got to make sure on these mud flats you're leaving like footsteps and tracks here." But she was like, "Leave nothing else." So she did. She's a tough woman, and I love her for it. So she holds all of us accountable, and the way we see accountability too, is a sign of respect. If somebody respects you enough to bring something to your attention, they respect that you're able to hold that information and that. Otherwise, the alternative is just walking away and letting somebody continue to do something that isn't respectful. So I see accountability as a sign of like compassion and respect and wanting to build closer relations. So I never take it as a bad thing, especially as a Tsleil-Waututh teaching the matriarchs. Something I'm still learning to do, but something they do is when they call somebody in, you don't even realize it. They're firm. They're really firm. The way of a Tsleil-Waututh matriarch, like my Auntie Shar, the way she goes about it is she'll tell you, she'll tell you like, oh, you gotta like work on this or this, and you it's so soft and so sweet and so firm, you don't even realize it. My dad was like, wait, I think I just got called out. He was like, but I feel pretty like good right now. And so there's a way of doing it. I find that's really good, and I think it's really important to do. I feel like that's something that a lot of people are afraid of, is being called out or like called in. And so I think there needs to be this like reduction of like shame and fear, for if it's something small, of course. Like if there's like bigger issues, that's different. But like if it's something that seems like amends could be made, or if a correction can be made, I feel like there needs to be this like fear that's really addressed. And I think it helps if somebody's an outsider coming in and understanding when you're being called in, it means that they have faith in you to be able to hear the words and take it. So
Thank you for sharing that. I think at times people look at us as Indigenous filmmakers and they're like, oh, you just know everything inherently and you know all this stuff and all the protocols, and it's just kind of assumed sometimes. I'm maybe speaking for myself, but we also have to go through the process of learning. And then after this learning, I think, Kayah, like the next time you shoot in the mud flats, you're able to tell people before they show up that this is kind of what you have to practice there, like only leave footsteps and not drop anything and to disturb it. So that ends up being built hopefully into your next projects. I think also maybe a misinterpretation is that Indigenous people can't burn locations. We can. Locations knows this all the time. Other Indigenous shooters who are not following protocol, it's not just a non-Indigenous Indigenous. We all have to follow the protocols. Every time we go into we're more scrutinized than you guys are. Sometimes you guys get to, or many of you will be able to mess up maybe a few more times than we do. To be like, oh, I didn't know. So, Jules, I want to kind of go back to talking maybe, because you do both doc and so unscripted and scripted. Did you find that your approach, now that you've like worked on the NFB documentary as well as your own scripted projects, that you have sort of a better knowing of how sustainability looks like between those two? Or
No, I'm also a mom, right? I have four sons, so it's like in me to be anti, no, auntie and mother. And I think, that comes through in a lot of my choices and work. And I just have an expectation. It's like, if I have to follow protocol and you're working with me, you're representing me in my company. So, do better. So I feel like I said before, like the stakes are higher, like they're more intense for us as Indigenous folks, because someone will call our mother or someone will call, it's true. It's just like, because these are our relationships. So I think with documentary, like I said, it's a little bit easier to manage because it's a smaller crew. And then, the relationships are deeper in a way because you spend more time together. and then you're traveling together. And then I also think you have to set the tone. And then once you set the tone, everybody feels like the stakes are high. And also with the larger crews, you know, I just think it does get a little bit more challenging, right? And then you have like a sustainability strategy that you want to implement. So that means there's a lot of conversation. But I think as Indigenous folks, the barriers, you know, is financial. We don't have the resources. And I find sometimes, which is really interesting, that the ones that are impacted are doing the work, and, you know, we're dealing with the emotional labor of it as well. So we're kind of leading the way in this resistance or in change, but we don't have hardly any of the resources that these bigger productions have, yet we're doing the work. So, but I think that comes from your own kind of value systems. And, you know, I don't know, like I just feel like I'm at this stage of my life where I'm like, if I feel like something's going south, then I'll walk. I don't need to be here. Do you know what I mean? But if I'm leading the show and if it's my production company, then I will do the preliminary work to make sure that everybody who's working with me is kind of on the same page.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I wanted to share something again. I have this little story. I worked on this show. It wasn't my show. It's kind of a funny thing. But we had a, what do you call them? Producing director. And the guy was non-native, and we were interviewing an elder, and the cameras were rolling. I don't know if you were there, Cam, we can't say what show it was, but, and then, oh my God, the elder starts introducing themselves in their language, and this guy, I'm hired as a director, okay, so I'm not even a producer, interrupts him. Can you say your name in English? And I was like, oh my God. And then I could just feel myself, and then, and then I just look at him, said, get off my set now. And then he went and sat on a log, and he had his back to me the whole interview because I want to work again. I don't care about this guy. He's not probably going to get invited back. But to do that to an elder, like, you should know better. But anyways, the whole shoot, I could see him, and he's looking over his shoulder at me, and he's sitting on a log. But I was just like, for me, no. Do you know what I mean? Like, we all have boundaries. Like, for me, that was it. Like, I was just like, don't do that on my set because I want to show my face. I'm a visitor here, and so are you. You know, and I think those are kinds of things that we carry with us, especially when we go into communities that are not our own.
Oh yeah, it's stressful. You stay up all night worrying about, did these people do something? Oh my God, what about this department?
Yeah.
So I find when I'm on set, I kind of, there's two different ways of looking at things. So like the secular sort of protocols, sort of putting in your sustainability plan, what people do, what every department does, and then sort of like are more the spiritual and protocol stuff. So both those things, I end up handing out protocols for each head of the department, and I expect them to go down the ladder and train each of those heads of departments. And what I haven't done is like sort of accountability check at the end, and then like we never get to debrief because we're always like we're always moving on, and then it's the end of the show. But I think there needs to be more post-mortems, I think, to me, implemented after to see actually if those protocols and rules have actually trickled down and what has happened. Lyana, I want to talk to you about sort of like keeping things small on the land, and how do we sort of balance, you know, our need to kind of get bigger and more funding as we grow up and make more gigantic projects. How do you think you'll take an idea about a small light touch crew and bring that into your next project? Is there anything that you've been thinking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for everything that both of you shared, because it very much resonates. And I guess the one thing that was I mean, this Nechako is my first feature-length documentary, so my first experience was something of any size, like that I had a cinematographer. I'm like, what? what a treat. But the you know, the how you talked about starting the day with prayer and ceremony. We did we'll call it intention setting, but it was very much about ceremony and gathering everybody together and smudging as people wanted to. And that was incredibly important and I actually don't think we did that on the first production trip. And I remember a mentor of mine had said, you know, to do this, like it's your territories and you're showing the leadership here. So start with a song, start with whatever. And somehow I did not do that on the first one. Then I realized and there were things that happened, and, you know, challenges that we experienced. And so I entered into like some serious reflection before the next production trip, and we brought in a cultural advisor, and I spoke to people and I was like, my God, how did I not realize that I should have done that? So very intentionally brought that into every other production trip, and it made this huge difference. And I know that it's maybe easier for us to do it with a smaller crew and a smaller group of people. But I think it's the kind of practice that whatever it looks like for people, for sure for Indigenous filmmakers, but I think for the world more, it, I think that what it shows is care and attention and honoring everybody's role in that, and sets this sort of standard that we're going to engage in together as we move through the process of making this film. And I think those values are really grounded in that place. And so, for us, it's like respect and reciprocity and not interrupting. Oof. And being light on the land. I remember you also reminded me the very last scene in Nechako. We were filming at the river where they had created these channels for the fish. It's about the Nechako River and our salmon, and they had created these channels where salmon could spawn. And as we're walking through, it's like we were really conscious of like, because there had been problems of cows trampling and this erosion into the river, and we're like, oh, we cannot be like the cows. Like, we cannot be trampling this riverbank and like wrecking the fish. But because of the lessons, because of what had been shared with us, it was really a part of our approach to filming. So I think that it's that sort of it's that sort of way of being that I think needs to just be infused in every story that gets made. This care and attention and honoring of what people bring to, in whatever role they have. I think, and it takes work, it takes resources, it takes time. And this is what I go up against too with my research. It's like I do the same kind of thing when I'm doing my research projects. I have to like get to know the community. I have to know that they want me there if I'm not from that community. And if they don't, then I'm like, cool. And then, you go away. But it doesn't necessarily conform to the timelines of funding and whatever, but we have to push back against that, and we have to make it a priority because it's a different way. It can't be business as usual.
Okay, I'll go to topics. So, I want maybe I'll just talk. So we'll talk about Mistik and sort of your idea about environmental post-apocalyptic, your short, and what inspired you to do that. And then Kayah, I think I wanted to ask you sort of about how do you incorporate hope and healing in the future when you're also dealing with climate crisis and something so imminent. I think those are the last two questions. Okay.
So Mistik is a short film that I did with very little money, and I had all 4 of my sons working on set with me. So they got in trouble a lot, but it was fine. And we got support from Doreen Manuel and Capilano, Indigenous Film Program.
Thank you, Doreen, if you're here.
I think, with that particular project, I also hired my students and a couple of friends from Montreal. It was very, communal, very small crew. And that film is about, twins that are left behind in a post-apocalyptic world, and they're breathing through trees in their backpacks. And it was an idea that I had when I was with my friend in Banff, and we're like, looking at the beautiful landscape going, wow, like we are so lucky. And it's a film about relationship and strength, and that these 2 little boys are trying to find their way home, basically, and to be able to breathe again. But very symbolic about where we are right now as Indigenous folks and what's happening around us. It's a statement, it's an act of resistance. And I think with the crew in particular, it was just really great to kind of see the younger generation working on set with me. And then the messaging and the story. And I don't know, it's just one of those films that I think I'm just really super proud of, because I also believe in ensuring that Indigenous folks have meaningful opportunities, and they can move forward in their career. So for me, that was why I hired my former students who were fabulous. And if you want to watch the film, it's with V-Tape distribution. But yeah, I think we have to, as Indigenous folks, storytelling is a part of who we are. It's Indigenous theory in a way into practice. And I think for us, it's our stories, and that is where we can kind of bring you all in and make sure we're all on the same page. And it provides you a different lens in terms of environmental issues that we're faced with as Indigenous folks. And the film was made with a lot of love and care. I just have to tell one really quick story about Tapwaywen, one of my twins. He was such a diva on set. And I was telling my crew, it was like, be respectful, follow protocols, be better. And then I'm on set with my son, and he's giving me complete attitude. And I'm looking at him, and he looks at me and he goes, Mom, you're the director? Direct. And I was like, take a breath. I'm going to count to 3, and you better be running. And then all of my, because I'm all about this, like, be respectful. And my face went really red. I was just like, I am going to chase him right now. Anyway.
Working with youth is hard, but working with your own youth that you gave birth to.
But who
Next
says
level,
that to the
next
director?
level. Yeah.
You're supposed to be the director, then direct. Oh my God.
It's the next level of children. Kayah, do you want to talk a bit about how did you balance the urgency of your short film, sort of like the climate change is approaching every day. Deep, your traditional territories is changing, and so much is happening that you can't stop. And then also making sure that you still are offering sort of healing and, a positive future for the environment.
This is actually a perfect question for my doc series that is not out. I just finished 2-3 weeks ago.
What's it called? Tell us what the name is.
It's called working title Village Under the Sea. It's an 4-part series, educational series about orca whales and their parallels with Coast Salish matriarchy. Like, they have very similar family structures. The southern resident orcas. It's incredible. So there's a lot of shared history and impact from colonization and things like that. And so oh my gosh, it was the hardest thing I've ever worked on. That was a really big theme and a big topic, as I used to just fully be full-time. Well, not full-time, I was in school, but as a teenager and growing up, starting from when I was 12, I started with my family opposing the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And that was a huge part of my life growing up, is just full environmental activism, and I felt very burnt out from it. Because there is a lot of eco-anxiety, and there was this urgency. And as an Indigenous young person, I had to really reflect on that. I was like, why are they wanting me to put so much of myself in, and self-sacrifice is seen as this great thing that I should do. I was like, that's not right. I should be encouraged to take care of myself. The way I feel, even the messaging at that time with the youth environmental movement was, the youth are gonna save the world, and I'm like, that's a lot of pressure. So I felt a ton of pressure, and it was actually film, when I stepped into film, that helped kind of ease that, as I was able to work through my own personal issues and trauma and heal myself through expressing myself. That was something that really helped me, and just being able to be creative and have my voice heard and in a really genuine to myself and vulnerable way, that was really, really helpful to me. And when people ask how to deal with that burnout and that eco-anxiety and that pressure, I say, go to the land, go to the place that you're fighting for, and really sit with it and let it heal you. And also especially for Indigenous young people specifically, if you are a person that has a extra energy, resources, privilege, you should, be giving more. But for young people that are marginalized or who have been through a lot, I say take care of yourself. Really take care of yourself. I kind of wish people said that to me more. But it's okay, because eventually somebody did, and eventually I listened, and I'm taking care of myself more now. But I found that when I stepped into film and I stepped into that creativity, that was really healing. And at the end of my doc series, I'm giving it away, but it's fine. It's
We'll all watch it. We'll all watch it.
I have a little less control. It's funded by National Geographic, so I've they're kind of putting it through a school system circuit. But I say to my little brother, who's featured in the last episode, I say to him, and He's 15 now, so he's quite young. I tell him, I was like, hey, I want to let you know that it's amazing what we're doing here, and it's great you care about the orca whales. You know, there's only 73, right, I believe right now, southern residents left. They say they're functionally extinct, and that's a really sad reality we have to face. But I told him, it's a beautiful thing. If you want to fight for them, if you want to fight for the land and water, you'll have so many people to support you and guide you. You come from a family of activists and a people that have been fighting for many years, but I want to let you know you don't have to. I I want to let you know that that you're special, you're important, and you're just as important as all of this that we're fighting for. No, you're more to me. Like your health, your well-being, it's like priority, and when you have the extra time, energy, and like resources to be able to give back, then you can. And so with that, like I just wanted him to feel okay, like he could be a kid. And yeah, anyways, and that was a message not only to him but to a lot of young Native people who felt that call. And I told him, oh, I'm definitely ruining it now, I'm gonna like quote my talk directly. I say that the future, it calls to you, not because you must save it, but because you're its heartbeat, you're a part of it, the story unraveling. So that's up to you. Like I told him, and he's like, yeah, I'll think about it. I was like, okay. He right now he loves guitar and he loves music, but and I'm so proud of him. But he felt really involved. It was his own choice to get involved with the documentary. So with hope, I think a lot of it comes with care, and with protection, and with like love and community. And I feel like uplifting each other and making our community stronger, making our people stronger, is going to make our world and our environments and our ecosystem stronger. And educating people, it's all starts with compassion. We cannot fight the climate crisis the way that it happened, with like intensity and that greed and that, like, I don't know, that it's almost like brutality. I think it's going to come from a place of care and compassion, personally.
Thank you. The heart work. Anybody raise your hand? If you want
We have time for
questions?
one
All
or
right.
two questions.
Hello, amazing talk. Thank you so much. I was curious, as like obviously when you are in charge, you can pick all of the crew, but what advice would you have for people that are maybe starting out and find themselves in places where they are surrounded by people with more power than them that are not like conscious and are very yeah, what kind of old way of thinking, and it's sometimes hard when you're surrounded by people that have a very yeah, a way of of trying to capture their whatever they're making, and you are there trying to make what be a part of that, but you're put against these people that just aren't receptive. What, yeah, is there anything from the you experiences you've had that or suggestions you have for people that are entering spaces like that?
I have. I can answer. So I have worked on bigger projects that are up to like 240 crew or more. One thing I always like to do is get your legal hat on and start to read some of the things that are important into the BC landscape and also Canada. So I always arm myself with a couple of policies and principles because that I can write down and be like, this doesn't actually follow the rules of the, you know. So I always use UNDRIP and DRIPA as a reason to like, if anybody like backs me into a corner, I'm like, actually, you're not following the principles of DRIPA, and they're supposed to be for sovereignty and like we determine ourselves, and so you're actually not following. You're going against rules and policies that are actually international. So you don't have to do that, but like, but find those rules and policies. Get together with people who are working on the sustainable policies, and you just have printouts, and you're able to, you know, you have to beat them at their game. And you have to know more than they do. You know, if you're an Indigenous woman, you have to know more than every single white guy in the room. Sorry, but it's just the way you have to be 3 times as good. But you have to know the rules and policies as much as possible, and to be able to at least control your department or who's around you, and then hopefully be able to refer to things to make it better. And I'm not saying you won't get fired.
You will.
You will at sometimes, and I have as well. But I don't. It doesn't stop me because I'm not going to work on something that doesn't follow with my values and my principles. And I only have a certain amount of time in my life, and then I'll have to move on to the next thing that matches what I feel. So
And so, Leena, can I just really quickly, because I don't work on big projects, but this is something that actually comes up in my research and my teaching, because I teach health, like science students, which it's like, what does that have to do with film? But actually, a lot of the things that I encounter, I feel like there are similarities in terms of, at least the work I'd like to do in the future. One of the things we talk about a lot in my classes is around power dynamics of calling in or calling out people who are doing like things. Excuse my language. And those dynamics, those power dynamics, when you have, senior people and your job is at risk if you say that. And sometimes people can't always afford to lose their job, but it's true. If you are able to, and it's like running counter to your values, yes, like maybe find another job. But if you can't, I think also, because we talk about this with my students, what are the strategies that you can use? And so I think that there are careful, strategic ways you can start to do that work of like questioning like the why and the how things are done. And I think it's allyship. I think it's finding other people who also recognize that this is happening and figuring out who those people are and can they help you and support you to like then challenge those practices.
Yeah, getting ally.
Yeah, because it's hard. That's not an easy, but yeah, especially if it's running counter to your values and principles.
But I mean, we live in a province that has so much amazing. Like
Yes.
BC is way ahead
Yes.
of the rest of the country. So
Yes.
I like that we can lean on the policy and the precedents that have been set
No,
in this
that's super
province
important. Yeah.
too. So, but it's a good idea. But I always get fired as well. So I'll take it. I'll take it.
I think it's like the key is to be a key creative or a producer yourself in your own production company and have your own sustainability policy. I think, if you don't want to work for anybody else because they're pissing you off, then maybe start your own company and then start,
For
I
sure.
don't know,
Do your own projects.
do your own projects.
Yes. And you'll meet the people. People will start coming out to you. When you start saying something, you're the person that's saying it first, but other people are also feeling that way. You're not going to be the only person in the room. So I'm just being really funny. Okay, next question.
We have
Next
time for one
question.
more.
I
If
thought
there
there
is
was one back.
anyone.
Anybody?
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's a little bit dark.
So Kayah, I've seen your movie and Our Grandmother the Inlet, and I think it's amazing. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Don't know if you can find it somewhere, but I was at the VIF. I'm actually wondering, because you mentioned your series, it's in the schools. How can I watch it? That's my
National
question.
Geographic?
Oh yeah, no, it's like just freshly done. The final edit was like very recent. So that won't be like out till next spring. And Our Grandmother the Inlet is currently licensed by the American History Museum in New York. So if you're in New York, or go give it a watch. Also, we still do like screenings and private screenings all the time. I love sharing it. Like I don't even know if I'm supposed to, but like
Social media. But you can follow you and next spring on your social media. Which
yes,
is
follow me. My Instagram's just my name. There's only one Kayah George, which is great. But that'll my Orthodox series, The Village. It will be out next spring, and it'll make its rounds to, again, it was made for secondary school students, and we have like an animated part for primary school students as well. After that, I really want it out in the world. Like, we will see. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I think that's it.
We can continue the conversation in just a moment in the reception area. But firstly, I'd love to invite Laura back, and then I'm going to do some quick, brief thank yous,
But
and then we'll finish up.
These guys for an amazing.
So thank you.
Thank you.
What a way to end it all. That was great. Thanks to all of you. And thanks to all of you for being here all day and sharing your energies and your insights. I think you should all give yourselves a round of applause.